It started as an ordinary family, quiet, unassuming, and trusted by everyone around them. But behind closed doors, a darkness was brewing. A secret so twisted, so dangerous that revealing it would shatter everything. No one suspected, no one saw the signs, and no one could have imagined the lengths someone would go to hide the truth. She tried to speak, to warn, to escape the grip of the nightmare she was trapped in, but her voice was silenced in the most chilling way. Now, for the first time, every hidden message, every cryptic warning, and every terrifying detail comes to light. The truth is monstrous, horrifying, and utterly unforgettable. Watch closely, because what you are about to see will make you question trust, family, and the darkness that can hide behind a familiar face. The last cry for help. The message was brief, chilling, and haunting. "I'll tell everything." Those 4 words, typed hastily in the dead of night, carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. She was terrified, and deep down, she knew that someone close to her could not afford the truth to surface. It was her stepfather, the man trusted by the entire family, whose very presence in her life had become a shadow of fear. At first, it seemed impossible to believe. The family was seen by friends and neighbors as ordinary, loving, and respectable. Their home appeared normal, yet behind closed doors, the reality was horrifying. Her stepfather had cultivated an image of a caring, patient guardian, someone anyone would trust without question. But the notebook she kept, hidden beneath loose floorboards in her room, told a different story. A story of manipulation, control, and a monstrous secret that no one was supposed to find out about. The morning she was found dead was surreal. Police arrived to a scene that looked peaceful at first glance, yet the small details betrayed chaos. A chair overturned, a faint smear on the carpet, and her phone still open on her bedside table. The final message blinking at the world in silent horror. The forensic team immediately noted signs of restraint and the presence of substances in her system that had sedated her. Not enough to kill instantly, but enough to weaken her, to silence her gradually. Whoever had done this had planned meticulously, leaving traces that were subtle but telling. Her friends described recent encounters that now seemed ominous in hindsight. She had become secretive, cautious, and even paranoid. Calls that once seemed normal were interrupted. Conversations were cut short. And there were moments when she appeared anxious, almost desperate to confide in someone who could help. But even those closest to her were kept in the dark about the full extent of what she had discovered, the secret she had vowed to reveal. The investigation quickly turned inward. Police questioned family members, neighbors, and acquaintances. Everyone expressed shock, but her private notes suggested she had sensed danger from someone intimately involved in her life. She had scribbled names and dates, cryptic messages like, "He is watching," and "Do not trust." Each entry reflected the terror of a young woman trapped in a nightmare orchestrated by someone. It became clear that her stepfather had carefully manipulated her environment, isolating her emotionally and psychologically. Friends recalled occasions where he subtly sowed distrust, planting seeds of fear and controlling who she could confide in. It was a quiet, calculated form of abuse, one that left her trapped and fearful of speaking out. The final message was her last attempt to reach someone who might understand, someone who might finally expose the darkness she had endured. Forensic evidence and digital clues began to corroborate her fears. Her online activity revealed searches about predatory behaviors, warning signs, and ways to report abuse, suggesting that she had known she was in imminent danger. The sedative traces confirmed that her stepfather had been systematically weakening her, controlling her, and ensuring she could not resist or escape. Every detail pointed toward a methodical, monstrous plan designed to silence her forever. By evening, the neighborhood was abuzz with whispers, each person speculating about how such horror could unfold in a family so seemingly ordinary. The reality was darker than anyone could have imagined. This was not a case of random violence or a moment of madness. It was premeditated, personal, and chillingly intimate. Her death marked the beginning of a terrifying revelation. The secrets she carried, the fears she voiced, and the warnings she left behind were about to unravel a story so monstrous that it would shock everyone who thought they understood her family. She had been dying before our eyes, and the truth behind her final hours would expose a nightmare hidden in the heart of a home, a secret no one was supposed to find out about. The first clues. The morning after her death, the house felt eerily quiet, almost frozen in time. Neighbors whispered about what had happened, their disbelief mixing with fear. How could something so monstrous happen in a family that appeared so normal? But behind the farce, aid of normalcy lay a darkness no one had imagined, a secret that she had been trying to reveal before it was too late. Investigators began retracing her final days, piecing together every encounter, every phone call, and every cryptic note she had written. Friends reported her becoming increasingly anxious in the weeks leading up to her death. She had cancelled plans, avoided certain places, and spent long hours scribbling in her hidden notebook. At first, these behaviors were dismissed as teenage angst or stress, but in hindsight, they were a desperate attempt to document the truth, to create a record in case she did not survive. One of the first clues came from her phone records. Encrypted messages, searches for ways to report abuse, and contacts she had reached out to in secret painted a picture of a young woman desperate for help. Her messages were short, sometimes cryptic, but they all pointed to a single reality. She had sensed danger closing in, and that danger came from someone she trusted implicitly. Every call, every typed word, was a quiet plea for someone to intervene. The stepfather quickly became a focus. On the surface, he was calm, composed, a man who played the role of the caring guardian to perfection. But the investigators noticed subtle patterns that raised questions. Neighbors recalled odd behaviors, late night walks around the neighborhood, frequent trips out alone, and small manipulations that isolated her from friends and extended family. It was becoming clear that his control over her life was not incidental. It was deliberate, calculated, and terrifyingly methodical. The notebook she had hidden beneath her floorboards revealed more disturbing details. Pages filled with observations, descriptions of fear, and cryptic warnings indicated that she had been aware of being monitored. Phrases like, "A watch is everything," and "no one can know," reflected a constant surveillance that had worn her down psychologically. She had been trapped in a web of manipulation, her freedom restricted, and her trust weaponized against her. Forensic evidence began to align with her fears. Traces of sedatives in her system suggested someone had been gradually weakening her over weeks. The subtle injuries indicated restraint rather than violence, a sign that the intention was to incapacitate rather than immediately harm. The perpetrator had carefully orchestrated the situation to ensure she could not escape, could not call for help, and would ultimately succumb to the control imposed upon her. Friends and teachers recalled small, overlooked incidents that now seemed chillingly significant. She had once shown bruises that were quickly explained away as clumsiness. She had appeared anxious when certain family members visited, and she had once whispered a warning that now seemed prophetic. "If I disappear, you will know why." These pieces, seemingly minor at the time, formed a terrifying puzzle that investigators were only beginning to understand. As the forensic team dug deeper, digital evidence emerged. Her search history revealed not only attempts to report abuse, but also inquiries about restraining orders, anonymous helplines, and even ways to protect herself from someone who had intimate knowledge of her routines. Each piece of digital evidence reinforced a terrifying pattern. Her stepfather had been monitoring her movements, controlling her environment, and isolating her from anyone who could intervene. By evening, the gravity of the situation became impossible to ignore. This was no accident, no fleeting lapse in judgment, no moment of uncontrolled rage. It was a premeditated, carefully orchestrated plan by someone with intimate access and a monstrous desire to maintain control. The town, once comfortable with the illusion of a safe, ordinary family, was beginning to realize the horrifying truth. The danger had come from inside the home, and she had been dying before our eyes. As investigators reviewed the evidence late into the night, they understood the stakes. The clues pointed to a predator who had mastered manipulation, who had hidden malevolence behind a mask of care, and whose actions had been meticulously designed to conceal the truth until it was almost too late. Every note, every message, every small, overlooked sign was a testament to her struggle, her courage, and the monstrous reality she had been trying to escape. The first clues had set the stage for a shocking revelation. The pattern was clear: she had been silenced, because the truth she carried was dangerous, the secret too monstrous for anyone to know. And as the investigation moved forward, it became evident that uncovering the full scope of this horror would expose not just a crime, but a deeply twisted betrayal, hidden in the heart of a family that seemed ordinary, safe, and loving. A family that harbored a monstrous secret no one was supposed to discover: the web of control. As the investigation progressed, The true horror of what had been happening began to emerge. Her death was no accident, no spontaneous act of violence. It was the culmination of weeks, possibly months, of careful manipulation, psychological torment, and control. Every detail pointed to a man who had learned to hide his monstrous impulses behind the mask of a caring stepfather, someone whose every action had been calculated to maintain dominance and secrecy. Forensic evidence provided chilling confirmation. The sedatives found in her system were not haphazardly administered. They had been measured carefully to weaken her over time. She had been rendered increasingly vulnerable, her ability to resist or escape systematically stripped away. Bruises and subtle marks suggested restraint rather than direct assault, proof that the goal had been control, not immediate harm. Whoever had done this had studied her routines, her habits, and even her interactions with others, ensuring there would be no chance of interruption. Her personal belongings revealed more layers of terror. The hidden notebook, once dismissed as a teenager's diary, became a roadmap to her fear. Detailed observations of her stepfather's movements, his moods, and his interactions with her were meticulously recorded. Notes like, "He waits until I am alone," and "I cannot tell anyone," painted a portrait of a young woman trapped in a nightmare that only she seemed to fully understand. Friends and acquaintances later admitted that she had become increasingly withdrawn, refusing invitations and avoiding social contact, a strategy she had begun unconsciously to protect herself. Digital evidence corroborated the psychological manipulation. Her online searches reflected a growing awareness of danger, ways to report abuse, advice for staying safe, and even encrypted communications with individuals she believed might help. But even in her attempts to seek assistance, there were signs of fear, as though she knew that someone close to her was watching her every move. Every effort she made to document the truth became an act of courage, a testament to her awareness and determination despite the oppressive shadow that loomed over her life. Investigators began interviewing her teachers, friends, and extended family members more thoroughly. Small incidents that had been overlooked before now took on a terrifying significance. The stepfather had subtly isolated her, discouraging friendships and creating divisions in the household that left her increasingly alone. Friends recalled sudden arguments, moments of tension that had never been explained, and a quiet anxiety in her demeanor that no one could have understood fully at the time. She had been preparing for a confrontation she could not escape, documenting everything in hopes that the truth would survive even if she did not. The patterns of control became more evident as the investigators mapped out her daily routines. Every route she took, every time she left the house, every interaction she had, all had been observed and manipulated. It was a predator's meticulous strategy: isolate, weaken, and dominate. The horror was not in a single act, but in the extended, patient planning that had gone unnoticed by everyone around her. Financial and social motives began to emerge as well. While the emotional and psychological control was monstrous, there were also hints of self-interest, secrets the stepfather had kept hidden, possibly tied to money, reputation, or past transgressions. Her knowledge of these secrets made her a threat, and in the predator's mind, silencing her was the only way to protect those interests. Every detail she recorded, every warning she whispered, had made her a target in a life and death game orchestrated from within her own home. By the end of this stage of the investigation, it was clear that her final message, "I'll tell everything," was more than a cry for help. It was a last testament to her awareness, bravery, and the horror she had endured. She had been trapped, controlled, and slowly dismantled psychologically and physically. The web her stepfather had spun was intricate and terrifyingly effective, designed to leave her isolated, weakened, and ultimately helpless. The town, once blissfully unaware of the darkness hiding behind a familiar face, was beginning to grasp the magnitude of the truth. A trusted family member, someone everyone assumed was protective and loving, had orchestrated a monstrous plan that ended in the death of a young woman trying desperately to expose it. Every new piece of evidence revealed not only her suffering, but also the terrifying intelligence and patience of her stepfather, someone who had hidden evil behind familiarity and trust, leaving a trail of fear that investigators were only beginning to follow. As the shadows of this web became clearer, it was evident that uncovering the full story would expose a level of betrayal and manipulation few could have imagined. She had been dying before our eyes, and the truth, painstakingly documented, carefully hidden, and finally revealed, would show a monstrous secret that no one was supposed to find out about. The suspect in plain sight. The investigation had now entered a critical stage. Months of painstaking work, cross-referencing evidence, forensic analysis, and interviews had begun to reveal a horrifying pattern. What had initially seemed like scattered signs of fear now formed a coherent, terrifying picture. The danger had come from inside the home, from someone the young woman had trusted implicitly, her stepfather. At first, authorities had to navigate the difficult terrain of disbelief. How could a man who had presented himself as caring, protective, and responsible be capable of such calculated cruelty? Friends and neighbors were incredulous, insisting he had always seemed kind and attentive. But the evidence told a far darker story, one that no farce aid could conceal. Subtle behaviors, once dismissed, were now reinterpreted as signs of manipulation and control. The late night walks, the obsessive monitoring of her routines, the quiet intimidation of friends. These were not coincidences. They were deliberate acts of psychological domination. Investigators began re-examining her interactions over the past months. Each phone call, each text, and each face-to-face conversation now carried new weight. Encoded warnings she had left in her notebook were cross-referenced with timestamps and locations, revealing that her stepfather's presence was often in the background during moments of distress. Her fears were not imagined, they were meticulously documented. A trail of terror that proved someone had been watching her constantly, studying her, controlling her life. Forensic evidence aligned chillingly with these findings. The sedatives in her system were not administered haphazardly. They had been measured to gradually weaken her, making her less able to resist, less able to reach out, and more dependent on the very person who posed the greatest threat. Bruises and subtle marks suggested restraint rather than struggle, proving that the predator had taken care to ensure she could not fight back. It was a patient, meticulous form of control, one designed to terrorize slowly before delivering the fatal act. Even her digital footprint revealed a calculated pattern of observation and threat. Searches for ways to report abuse, inquiries about protection, and attempts to reach out to trusted contacts were all evidence that she had understood the danger and was attempting to escape it in her own small, desperate ways. Yet her efforts had been insufficient to break the hold her stepfather had over her life. The web he had woven was precise, controlling, and deadly. Witness testimonies further confirmed the psychological manipulation. Friends spoke of her growing withdrawal, the unexplained tension at home, and the sense that she was being silenced, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. Her stepfather had isolated her, limiting her access to allies, and systematically undermined her confidence and autonomy. These acts, subtle and almost imperceptible to outsiders, created a suffocating environment in which her fear could flourish and her voice could be stifled. Financial and personal motives began to intertwine with psychological ones. Evidence suggested that her stepfather had secrets, actions, debts, and possible criminal involvement that she had begun to uncover. Each discovery she made became a threat to him, a reason to ensure her silence. Her meticulous documentation of these secrets had made her a target, and the lengths he went to maintain control underscored the depth of his desperation and the monstrous extent of his plan. By now, the investigation had zeroed in on the suspect in plain sight. The image of the ordinary, trustworthy man had crumbled, revealing a predator who had manipulated, terrorized, and ultimately destroyed the life of the very person he was supposed to protect. The monster's methods were slow, calculated, and almost imperceptible, a terrifying reminder of how evil can hide behind familiarity and trust. The community, once shocked by the news of her death, now grappled with the reality that the perpetrator had lived among them, hidden in plain sight. Every neighbor, every friend, and every family member had unknowingly passed by the orchestrator of her demise. The trust that had once felt safe was now shattered, replaced with a chilling awareness of the darkness that had lurked beneath a familiar face. As the investigation prepared to move toward confrontation, the tension was palpable. Every piece of evidence, every recovered note, and every witness testimony pointed to a monstrous truth. She had been dying before our eyes, and the person responsible had hidden in plain sight, wielding fear and control as instruments of terror. The next steps would reveal not only the extent of the deception, but also the shocking reality of just how meticulously her life had been manipulated and destroyed. The stage was set for the next revelation, the moment when the predator would be confronted, and the full scope of the monstrous secret would finally be exposed to the world. The final clues. The investigation had reached a point where the horrifying truth was beginning to emerge in full clarity. Every small detail, every cryptic note, and every subtle sign she had left behind started forming a chilling pattern. The young woman had been trapped, controlled, and ultimately silenced by the very person who was supposed to protect her, her stepfather. But as the pieces came together, the scale of his deception and the depth of his monstrous planning became almost unimaginable. Forensic evidence painted a meticulous picture. The sedatives in her system, carefully measured, confirmed that her stepfather had been administering them to weaken her gradually, rendering her increasingly powerless. Bruises and subtle marks indicated restraint rather than immediate violence, suggesting a calculated approach to incapacitation. Nothing about her death had been impulsive. It had been planned with cold, deliberate precision. The monster had orchestrated every aspect, ensuring she would have no chance to escape or defend herself. Her hidden notebook became central to understanding the full extent of the horror. Pages filled with detailed observations, coded warnings, and documentation of her stepfather's behavior revealed that she had been acutely aware of the danger closing in. Notes like, "He watches every move," and "I cannot trust anyone," underscored the suffocating psychological control she had endured. Each entry, once overlooked, now served as a roadmap to the manipulation, intimidation, and terror she had experienced. Digital evidence confirmed the systematic nature of the abuse. Her search history reflected a growing awareness of her vulnerability. Inquiries about reporting abuse, protecting herself, and reaching out to trusted contacts. Encrypted communications indicated her desperate attempts to document the truth and seek help. Though even these efforts were constantly monitored, the predator's control had been almost absolute, making her attempts to escape an uphill battle she could never fully win. Interviewing friends and teachers shed further light on the psychological manipulation. She had become increasingly isolated, her social interactions carefully restricted by the stepfather. Small incidents, once dismissed as normal family tension, were now seen as deliberate attempts to control her environment and cut her off from potential allies. The subtlety of his tactics was chilling. He had maintained the appearance of care and concern while systematically dismantling her autonomy. Financial motives also began to surface. Investigators uncovered irregularities, suggesting that her stepfather had hidden secrets that she had begun to uncover. Debts, undisclosed accounts, and possibly illegal activities. Her awareness of these secrets made her a threat, and in his eyes, silencing her was the only way to protect himself. The interplay of greed, control, and fear created a monstrous rationale behind her murder, one that combined psychological, physical, and financial manipulation. The final clues came from witnesses who had previously stayed silent. Their testimonies revealed patterns of late-night surveillance, unexplained absences, and subtle intimidation. These incidents, pieced together with forensic and digital evidence, painted a terrifying portrait of a calculated predator who had studied her routines and orchestrated the perfect moment to strike. It was not just murder, it was the culmination of psychological warfare, a strategy executed with terrifying patience and intelligence. By the end of the investigation's penultimate phase, the truth had become undeniable. She had been dying before our eyes, slowly, quietly, and methodically. The web of control her stepfather had spun was intricate and merciless, leaving a trail of manipulation, fear, and deception. Every detail recovered, every note examined, and every witness interviewed confirmed the monstrous reality of what had happened behind the closed doors of an ordinary home. The stage was set for the final confrontation. Investigators were ready to expose the full extent of the stepfather's control, manipulation, and monstrous actions. The evidence was overwhelming, the witnesses consistent, and the psychological profile undeniable. The time had come to face the predator and reveal the secrets that had been hidden for far too long. As the investigation moved toward its climactic conclusion, one thing became chillingly clear: this was not merely a story of abuse or betrayal. It was a deliberate, calculated, and monstrous act, executed by someone who had hidden evil behind familiarity and trust. The world was about to witness the monstrous truth she had struggled to expose, a truth that no one was supposed to uncover, but that could no longer remain hidden. She was dying before our eyes. The monstrous truth, the time for confrontation had finally arrived. After months of painstaking investigation, forensic analysis, witness testimonies, and digital sleuthing, the terrifying truth was ready to surface. Every piece of evidence, every hidden note, every subtle sign of manipulation had led to one undeniable conclusion: her stepfather, the man who had presented himself as a protector, was the orchestrator of her suffering and ultimate death. When authorities confronted him, the reaction was a mixture of denial, anger, and a chilling calmness. For years, he had perfected the mask of normalcy, concealing manipulation, psychological torment, and control behind a veneer of familial concern. But the mountain of evidence was overwhelming. Her hidden notebook, forensic findings, digital records, and witness accounts left no room for evasion. Every act, every effort to maintain control, every subtle intimidation was now laid bare. The forensic team's findings were crucial in illustrating the meticulous nature of his crime. The sedatives, carefully dosed to weaken her gradually, confirmed the premeditation. Bruises and signs of restraint showed deliberate incapacitation, proving he had systematically dismantled her ability to resist. Digital footprints revealed her desperate attempts to seek help, the searches, encrypted messages, and cautious notes indicating her acute awareness of the danger. But the predator had anticipated every move, leaving her trapped in a psychological and physical cage from which there was no escape. Witnesses recounted details that had been overlooked or dismissed previously. Late-night walks, unexplained absences, subtle threats, and psychological isolation all pointed to the stepfather's deliberate orchestration of fear. He had monitored her every interaction, manipulated her social environment, and ensured that no one could intervene. The cruel precision of his control revealed a chilling intelligence and a monstrous intent to silence her completely. Financial and personal motives added another layer of horror. Evidence suggested that she had begun to uncover secrets, hidden accounts, undisclosed transactions, and possibly illegal dealings, making her a threat to him.